All right, here today we're going to start talking about the performance management. Performance management. And if you've ever had a job, I'm sure you're familiar with the process in some way, shape, or form. But what's going to happen in performance management is, of course, your annual report to your manager. They write a report. They use a report as perhaps a basis of whether or not you get a raise or whether or not you're terminated or something of this nature. Well, traditional performance management has been pretty much, once a year, and you would meet with your manager. And the whole idea of performance management is perhaps to clarify what your responsibilities are, to give you some feedback, obviously, on where your deficiencies are, where your strengths are. But clearly, the idea is to make, it's a base for making decisions, as I said, about who gets a raise, perhaps, or how big of a raise, or something like this. Okay. Now, the idea of performance management as a cycle, that is to say, as an ongoing thing. In traditional systems, as we said, you meet once a year with your manager. In a more modern performance management cycle, what's going to happen is the manager's going to come in and have the organization's goals and values, as far as productivity, etc. And then they're going to create some kind of objectives for the worker. Okay, well, you need to do yada yada. The worker's going to, of course, implement a plan and try to improve their performance. Then performance will be tracked on a regular basis, right? And feedback will be given regularly, like daily if necessary, okay? And then perhaps after every month or something, then you're going to have a review of what's going on. What have you performed? Is the plan creating what you want? And perhaps modify the plan accordingly, okay? So it's an ongoing process, and therefore it's a lot more labor intensive for the manager. But once this is in place, then it will make the manager's job so much easier. But getting it started would be quite time consuming. So as we said, normal performance appraisal is about once a year, whereas performance management is, on and on. Performance appraisal is often developed outside the manager-employee relationship, right, at the human resources or something. So they are different, and they have different values. So when it comes to performance management, it becomes a heck of a lot harder when you have telecommuting. And so what happens is that managers don't have the same types of experiences with employees that they would in a traditional workplace. Therefore, there's going to be a lot more room for errors in a performance management system if you never physically met the employee that you're rating. Okay. All right, so one of the PSYOP's top 10 trends has to do with remote workers and has to do with employee engagement and organizational commitment. We're gonna talk about organizational commitment later, and employee engagement. We'll talk more about in terms of like the motivation topics, and organizational commitment we're going to do in terms of attitudes. Okay, we're going to have an entire module on attitudes. And so clearly we find that this performance management cycle has huge implications for how do we create the engagement and the commitment to an employee when they never physically step foot in our building. So what you find is a performance management system, if done improperly, can lead to lawsuits. I mean, clearly lawsuits are the inevitable outcome to a poorly designed performance management system of any kind. But just like we've said repeatedly, I mean, you just can't repeat it enough. If done improperly, then employees walk away from the review process and say, no fair. And we've talked about what happens when an employee feels no fair. So clearly, an organization should be invested quite heavily in designing a good performance management system. All right.